This is the 2022 Mercedes-Benz EQS 580 4MATIC. It is not the first, or indeed the second, modern production EV to wear a Mercedes badge. That privilege goes to the Tesla-engineered B-Class ED of 2012 and the 2020 Mercedes-Benz EQC SUV, respectively. And coincidentally, we're recording this review the same day that Mercedes-Benz has revealed the EQS SUV, this car's bigger luxury SUV sibling. It's basically like this car, only in SUV form. It has much of the same features as this vehicle, but it can seat up to 7, depending on which car you pick. But this is the first Mercedes-Benz to actively go after Tesla's Model S. It combines the S-Class body styling and interior comfort with a powerful all-wheel drivetrain, opulent interior, and in this version, a door-to-door 56-inch digital dashboard that Mercedes-Benz calls the MBUX, although a traditional dash is also available. Today, slightly better dressed than usual, we'll be showing you around this car's exterior and interior, taking it for a drive and answering a very important question. Who is this car for? The answer, I think, might surprise you.
This is the long version of this video, so if you want the bite-sized version, follow the link below.
And because we know that you are super busy, there are chapter marks letting you skip to the relevant section.
There are probably a few things that you notice when you look at the EQS side-on. The first is just how long it is, 5.26 metres to be exact, or just over 207-ish inches. You could park two original smart cars end to end and they'd still be shorter than this vehicle. In fact, those two smart cars end to end would be closer in size to the EQS SUV, which, as we learned this morning, is a tiny bit shorter than the sedan variant at 202 inches or 5.13 metres. But let's not get cocky about the sheer length of this car, because the EQS is actually a little shorter than the internal combustion engined S-Class. And while the two may look similar, they're actually completely different underneath. Mercedes-Benz chose to build the EQS on a brand new platform it calls the EVA. That platform will underpin future electric Mercs, including the soon-to-launch EQS SUV. The internal combustion engine S-Class, meanwhile, is based on the company's second-generation modular rear architecture platform. The EVA platform that underpins the EQS can accommodate either a single rear-wheel drive motor or dual-motor all-wheel drive configurations, but I'll let Nikki talk about the tech specs of the drivetrain in a moment. What I do want to note here, though, is the monster 22-inch wheels on this particular EQS, the dual-motor 580. Because the car is so large, the massive wheels don't look out of place, but they also look like the kind of wheels you wouldn't want to hit a curb with. Luckily, because this car has all-wheel drive steering with up to 10 degrees of freedom in each direction, it's easier to move in a tight space than you might think. Before I hand over to Nikki at the front, let's talk about this shape that Mercedes-Benz refers to as the one-bow design. It means that the EQS has a coefficient of drag that's as low as 0.2, which gives it the lowest coefficient of drag of any production car on sale today. Well, tied with the Lucid Air. Some of that comes from nips and tucks all around the vehicle, but these retractable door handles help here too. And yes, those with a really keen eye will note that the A-pillar has been moved further forward than it would be on an ICE S-Class, while the C-pillar has been pushed back a little. Hey Nikki, do you want to open up the bonnet and show everyone the frunk?
Ha ha, Kate. Very funny. You see, while this car has the long snout of a vehicle with good breeding, albeit slightly smaller than the S-Class, there's no front trunk because it's taken up with drivetrain and power electronics, plus the massive cabin filtration system that the EQS has as standard. Genuinely, it gives the Tesla biodefense system a bit of a run for its money. In fact, if you look up the hood in the driver's manual, there's a digital copy accessible from the interior touchscreens, you will be presented, and I'm not joking, with a page or more of warnings strongly discouraging you from opening the hood. But to be clear, there is a way to open up the front, but it requires popping off some trim pieces inside and pulling of a Bolton release lever. Then again, if you are spending 6 figures on a car, I'm guessing you probably have someone to do such menial things for you. So what about the washer fluid, I hear you ask? Well, if you're one of the rare people who actually does replenish your washer fluid, that can be added via a tiny little filling spout on the driver's side A-pillar, where many normal EVs would have a charge port door. The charge port door on this car, though, is on the passenger side rear of the vehicle. So let's talk charging. On board, the EQS can charge at up to 9.6 kilowatts from an AC charging station in North America, or 11 kilowatts three-phase in Europe. By the way, there's even a 22 kilowatt AC option if you're so inclined and live in a country with three-phase AC charging. The DC quick charging port with plug and charge as standard can accept up to 200 kilowatts of quick charging goodness, meaning you can really quickly replenish the battery to 80% on the road, especially if you set a rapid charging station as your destination and the battery preconditions. We've seen close to 200 kilowatts the 2 times we've rapid charged this, which is useful because this car has a usable 107.8 kilowatt hours of battery capacity that is good for an EPA rated 340 miles. That's 547 kilometers. The rear-wheel drive EQS 450 Plus can squeeze an extra 10 miles of range, 16 kilometers on top of what this car can do on paper. But well, everyone who's driven it finds that it easily exceeds the EPA range. Kate had to drive it for a really long time to drain the battery flat. I've heard of people getting 400 plus miles, 643 kilometers out of one of these without even trying. Oh, and lest I forget, the EQS 450 Plus has a 245 kilowatt drivetrain that does the stoplight sprint in 6.2 seconds and goes all the way to an electronically limited 130 miles per hour, 210 kph. While this variant has a 385 kilowatt at the wheels and a 4.3 second sprint time. Top speed, though, is the same, which frankly feels a bit disappointing given how this looks, very much like an Autobahn cruiser. Before I pass to a very drenched Kate at the rear, let's talk about this massive front grille area. Obviously it's not a grille per se, it's a very fancy trim piece, but at the top of it you'll see that there's a very fine light bar that joins up the 2 headlights. This particular car is fitted with Mercedes-Benz digital light LED headlights with projection function. What do? Well, this is a super smart lighting system that can do things like adjust your headlights when you go up a hill or project warnings onto the road in case you miss things like stop signs.
Like so many modern sedans, this car is really a hatchback, but thanks to the sweeping design, the rear is very long. To get into the boot, you can click the automatic boot raising button in the driver's door, or you can push in on the top of the Mercedes badge right here. The hatch sweeps up with quite a lot of haste and, interestingly, does not beep when you close it, at least not on this car. The rear load bay can accommodate 610 litres, 21.5 cubic feet if you keep the rear seats up. There is a pass-through to let you carry ski poles, and well, I can't think of anything else that's pretty long that you'd be comfortable carrying in a vehicle this well appointed. However, if you want your driver to spend all afternoon cleaning the garden refuse from the rear, you can push the rear seats down for a total of 1,770 litres, 62.5 Freedom units cubed. But you know what? That's enough talking about the car. Let's get in and drive it.
So we had a look around the outside and now it's time to drive, and because I am awesome You offered to be my chauffeur for the first bit of this.
Oh, yes, Mum.
And also because you get travel sick in the back of cars.
Yeah, that might be part of it.
And being sick in a $120,000+ car is probably not a good thing if we want to get more cars to review. So
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be ideal, certainly.
it's a tough job, but I'm willing to take it. So we haven't talked about the interior of this vehicle, and we decided that rather than sit there and talk about it, we'd just drive and talk about it. So let's start at the front with this huge 56-inch MBUX dashboard in this version that allows the front seat passenger to do things like control the media, set the destination, control other key functions of the car without distracting the driver. And I love that. I think that's something that we should have more cars offer as an option.
It is an ocean of screen. And you also get the disco lighting effect, which is entertaining, but it doesn't fit what I normally think of as a Mercedes feature.
Right, so there's this 64 color LED system that allows you to pick your own color. So right now you might be able to see here it's blue at the front of the rear door, and then it becomes red as you go towards the rear. Now it's changed to blue, now it's changed to red. I don't know, it seems to change. Maybe it's slowly pulsing.
I did one of the standard settings is the multicolour array, where it just swoops the pink and blue around the car.
You have a lot of adjustment on that front seat.
I do. I have a hell of a lot of buttons. In fact, when I first got in the car, I spent about 10 minutes just trying to get to a place that was reasonably comfortable with the adjustments that it has. And you can adjust the bolster, you can adjust the lumbar support really in a fine-grained manner, although it actually took my wife finding that in the menu for me to know how to do it. And then it has this, which is the headrest.
This thing here behind my head, it's like a plush airbag made of leather and suede.
Yeah, and I whatever I do with the seat, the rest of the seat I can get really comfortable and I can get to a position that's really good. But this, I cannot position it in a way that doesn't feel like it's forcing my head forwards. And I'm not quite sure what that's about, and maybe there's an adjustment that I've missed. Like I said, it took some time before I worked out how to do the lumbar adjustment. But it's very adjustable, and I think if you've got the right shaped body, it'll be enormously comfortable. The seats are very plush,
And you can have ventilation, you can have heating.
Yes, and massage. You can say, hey Mercedes, to turn on things like the driver's seat massage or a kinetic process that just moves and adjusts the seat as you're sitting here to make sure that you're not getting too stiff.
Which, is quite useful if you are going to drive this car for 350 miles. We'll come to range and driving experiences later on. But here in the back, it's not quite as comfortable as I would like it to be for a car of this price. But one thing that is really important to note here is the suspension. It's got an adjustable air suspension system that's very, very good at soaking up most of the bumps. And there's not a lot of road noise that's transmitted to inside the cabin. It wasn't until I drove this car down the hill from where I live up in the mountains to run some errands on Saturday, and then later that day we did the same thing in a Bolt, and it wasn't until I went back into the Bolt that I realized how much the Bolt jumps around on that little country road compared to this car. Obviously this is a lot heavier, but the suspension setup on it is just sublime.
The other thing to note about that air suspension is it is tunable. You can select different modes, so it has a sport mode and it has a comfort mode, and the difference is really quite dramatic between the two.
In terms of seats and seat belts, there's an interesting trick that this car has, which I've never encountered in a car before. That's when you put the seat belt on, it kind of tightens automatically.
Yes, when you engage drive, it pre-tensions it slightly for you.
Which is very weird, but it's also quite reassuring In terms of lights here at the rear, we have a little lovely LED reading light. Interestingly, there isn't a coat hook here because there's a coat hook right on the B pillar. So if I pull down this armrest in the rear here, it gives me a little tray for, I don't know, for pens or things. If I press it again, it comes out as a cup holder, very fancy cup holder that just sits there in the rear of the car. The armrest is at just the right height, but again, my neck is starting to actually ache a little bit because I'm instinctively kind of craning my neck down a little bit rather than keeping it upright. And I think that's because the rear headroom in this car is severely restricted. And I should point out that this car has, you know, a fully electric panoramic glass roof. And so you get a little bit of extra headroom from that. But where I'm sitting is I'm right at the lip between where the sunroof is and where the interior trim is. Which brings me to a comparison that I want to make between this car and the Lucid Air. Now, I think the Lucid Air has better rear seats than this car, especially the one that doesn't have the super long range battery pack, because it has a little drop in the floor so you can put your feet a little bit lower. It just feels that this car is just a tad compromised. Now, of course, the day we're filming this, the EQS SUV has just been announced, and it has another row of seats behind. So if you were in the middle row, you'd have a lot more headroom. And I cannot wait to try that car out because I think that would be a little bit more comfortable, certainly from a passenger perspective. Kate, you very generously stopped so I could get into the front. Thank you. The rear seat, it was starting to bug my back.
Yeah, it's not as comfortable as you would like. I think if you're shorter...
The trim on this is very good, with exceptions.
It is. It's really bizarre because so many of the contact surfaces are really nice, and then you find something that's just not. Like on the edge of the steering wheel here, there's this sharp edge where the plastic hasn't been rounded off properly, and it just happens to be where I rest my hands when the car is in lane centering mode. So every time I was driving down the freeway, I'd be like, it's scratchy. And then the air vents just up front, they look nice, but they don't feel very nice to use.
See, I like these. The side air vents are quite sublime.
Yes.
You can twist them. You can position them just where you want. There's just enough drag to keep it in position. These big circular ones. You're talking about these front ones now,
yes,
aren't you?
the front center ones. If you just move them, and they're slightly sticky, and
I mean, it's not. So it's like parts of the car are very nicely finished, and then the parts that you wouldn't necessarily see or pay attention to in everyday driving occasionally feel like someone has cut some corners.
yeah, there's just some areas where the plastic is just a little cheap feeling, like the USB-C sockets in the back seat, where you flip down the ones on the back of the center console and it feels like something from a kind of mid-90s mid-range executive car. It doesn't feel like I expect.
There are some interesting choices about this car that make me scratch my head. The first one is this center console kind of command center, which is tactile. You push on it and it responds. But there are certain things, if you just touch it, it doesn't do anything. You have to actually push down to get it to respond. I've just told it to go into the EQ mode. You can change the cameras. Interestingly, unlike the Tesla Model S, X, 3 and Y, you cannot display the cameras when you're driving at above a certain speed, which I think is always a bit of a shame. You press on the picture of the Mercedes to give you access to all of the car. Everything in here is very clearly set out in this display. This whole front center console area here, this is gorgeous. This is walnut with,
Yes.
I believe it's aluminium inserts, and it is just really beautiful. Very nice sort of connection. It's got an NFC reader, so you can actually pair your car with a phone and it will identify you with an NFC. It has a fingerprint reader, right here that you can also use to set up, if you want to have your car respond to your fingerprint to set up the settings. That's very over the top. Sometimes you have to go hunting for functions.
Absolutely. I've found that a lot of things I'll find by accident.
Right.
And then I can't quite work out how I got there. So adjusting the lumbar support, it took me several attempts to work out. Having seen my wife do it from the passenger seat, I knew there was an option in the menu, but I then couldn't find it for quite some time.
Let's talk about some of the options that are available for this car. Now, this car doesn't have head-up display, which I thought was kind of unusual.
No,
But I believe it is available as an option.
It is available as an option.
And it doesn't have the level 3 autonomous capabilities.
No, but its Drive Pilot thing is very good.
Its Drive Pilot is very good, I'll admit. But obviously if you had the Drive Pilot 3, which I believe is coming, you'd have a different steering wheel with 2 little extra bits where your thumbs go that would, indicate whether the car was driving itself or not.
Yes, so that would be for the level 3 autonomous version.
And we've not got that here, we've got the level 2.
Yes.
We are in the 580.
Yes.
There is going to be a higher performance variant coming.
Something AMG-ish.
And, in terms of performance, 4.2 second sprint time. But it is limited to that top speed of 210 kilometers per hour, which I believe is about 120 miles per hour, which feels very slow. Before we talk about any of the exterior tech of the car, there is one final interior thing I want to talk about. Would you please move your visor to the side?
No. No, I would not, because... Can nobody build cars with visors anymore?
See, I can do it because I'm further back than you.
Yes.
But because of the way that this car is set up, and because I have quite short legs and a long torso, the car insists that I have the seat quite far back, the steering wheel quite high up, and the seat, even if it's low, I still bash my head. And interestingly, because this car has, the semi-autonomous capability, it tells you that you have to position your wheel so that you can see all 6 dots at the top of the display. And that's because there are cameras hidden in the top half of that dashboard above the map as we see it right now in the Speedo. And it needs to be able to track your eye movements. It's very much like Ford's Blue Cruise or GM's Super Cruise. And that means you are a little bit constrained as to where you sit. And that means that this just gets in the way.
Yes. Because I actually had my seat set up differently and the car moaned at me and said I needed to move so that it could see my eyes.
Yeah, and I had exactly the same thing.
And now I can't use the visor.
And I bet when you had it set so that you could use the visor, the car complained that you weren't in the right position.
Yes.
This car's got some pretty impressive headlights. It's a kind of intelligent light, a bit like a Matrix LED setup, where the car can project things onto the road. It can project the width of a lane in a construction zone. It can detect that you are in a construction zone and figure out how wide the lane markings are and then project those onto the road. It can warn you of hazards. If you go through a stop sign or you come up to a stop sign and it thinks you're not going to stop, it will project a stop sign onto the road. And at night time, if you are going up a steep road, as we are right now, the headlights actually change where they are casting light because you're going uphill. Because normally, if you just had old-fashioned dumb headlights with dipped headlights, it wouldn't be thrown as far at night time up a hill. And that when you were going downhill, it would blind everybody coming the other way. This headlight system adjusts. It can figure out how far away the road surface is, and it can figure out whether you're going uphill or downhill and change the light accordingly. It's also supposed to have anti-dazzle technology capabilities, which I think is super important. American cars do not have any type of light shaping to prevent oncoming traffic from being blinded by your headlights, which, if you suffer from any kind of night blindness or sensitivity to lights at night time, makes driving at night an absolute horror. So we've just switched over. How was the passenger seat?
It's much the same, very comfortable, but the headrest annoys me.
We do have this touchscreen display here for you.
Yes.
Which I'm not going to ask you to play with because I know that will make you travel sick.
Oh no, I can play with it. It has a whole array of things that you can do. So it provides information about the car. It allows you to fiddle with a variety of the car's settings, including the display and the way that Hey Mercedes is working and all sorts of bits and pieces.
It has a web browser because this car's got, full internet connectivity. It's got over-the-air software updates, and the Hey name function relies on a decent internet connection in order to work.
Yes, and that can be quite frustrating because as we are at the moment, we have no internet connection, and the things that work and the things that don't are kind of opaque. And you'll find that you can do one thing, like maybe turn on some function like the reading lights, but that other functions, like say turning on the massage seat, disappears, and it's really unclear to me why. So how's it to drive then, Nikki?
So the four-wheel steering is really sublime, and I can go around corners far more quickly in this car than physics would dictate. It has up to 10 degrees in the rear of assistance for steering, and it means this car has a ridiculously small turning circle for something that is longer than two original smart cars, as we said earlier.
It is quite astonishing how small the turning circle is on this car. I found in town particularly that I could manage turning around and getting into tight spaces in a way I really didn't expect to be able to do.
The driver's dashboard is very clear, very nice resolution. It's got your speedometer on the left in analog form, and then it's reinforced above with a digital speedo, which I really like. I prefer digital speedos. And then on the right hand side, it's got this power meter effectively that tells you how much power you're sending to the wheels as a percentage of the theoretical maximum.
And that will display if, as I did yesterday in an attempt to do a charging test, you run the car right down. So I took it down yesterday to 6 miles of range remaining, and at that, as you get nearer and nearer to that, it starts limiting your power, and it displays that power limit on the power gauge with a little orange kind of glowing pointer.
Very much as the original Tesla Model S did.
Yes.
In its thing here. We should talk about these panels. So obviously it looks like a Tiptronic gearbox, but it's not. It's actually an ability that allows you to change the amount of regeneration or recuperation, as they call it at Mercedes-Benz, when you lift off the throttle. Right now we're in normal recuperation. We can then change it to increased recuperation. So I'll lift off, and actually you get a lot more regenerative braking. Or you can turn on what's called intelligent recuperation. Did you play with that?
I did, and it is interesting. I think it's an experience that I could get used to. When you lift off, if you're in traffic, then it slows down very much faster, and it will bring you to a complete stop behind the car in front without you touching the brake. Pretty much one pedal driving. However,
you're freaked out by the brake pedal, aren't you, Kate?
Well, I am a little freaked out by the brake pedal. I'm also a little freaked out by the intelligent recuperation, which brings me to a much faster stop than I normally would, much later than I normally would. So I would typically drive quite gently in traffic, leaving a fair size gap and slowing fairly gently to a stop. Whereas I found with the intelligent recuperation, I would be covering the brake and then getting just to the point of being like, I'm going to have to stand on the brake, and the car would start braking and come to a stop. But it does work. It does work very well, and if you got used to it, I'm sure that it would become something that you trusted much more. In the time that I've had the car, I haven't reached that level of trust to be able to say, you know what, I believe this is going to do it without me being involved.
The pedals don't give me a huge amount of feedback. The regen on liftoff is good. You can control that with the paddles. The brake pedal feels a bit disconnected.
It is very disconnected, and it also moves depending on what the regen is doing.
Yes.
Which is quite disconcerting.
So if you have it in intelligent recuperation mode and you're coming up to traffic and you go to push it down, the brake pedal has started to feed in, and so it's in a different position to where you think it's going to be. And that can be really off-putting.
I assume that's something that you would get used to driving the car, but yes, I absolutely found it quite odd to reach for a pedal that isn't there.
Of course, we're driving on a country road right now, so we're not making use of the cruise control. But I've driven on the freeway quite a lot with this and was very impressed with the kind of level 2 semi-autonomous driver assistance system that this vehicle has. It's capable of keeping you in your lane. It's capable of doing assisted lane change, which is really good. You just tap the indicator, and then when there is a space, the car will automatically change lanes for you. It's effectively where enhanced autopilot is. I do sometimes find a little nausea in the passenger seat when we're doing loopy, twisty roads like this, in a way that I might not feel in other vehicles, partly because the suspension does so much damping that sometimes I think my brain expects there to be more bumps, and when there isn't, that's when I start to feel a little nauseated. I'm feeling a little nauseous now, and it's not because I'm driving the car hard. I think it's because of this gentle rolling that you're getting as you're moving along. Obviously, we can't talk about this car in its price point, clearly going after Tesla and the Model S, without talking about acceleration and performance. This thing, straight off the mark, 4.2 seconds sprint time. It feels quicker.
It does. It definitely feels like a fast car.
But it's not a fast car, because it doesn't have a very high top speed.
No, and that is an interesting decision, particularly for a German automaker, to have a car which one would think would be at home on the Autobahn, but instead is limited to 210 kilometers an hour. Is that right?
210, so that's on 120-ish.
Which I have gone nearly that fast on the Autobahn, and it is far too slow to travel on the Autobahn.
So there you have it, the 2022 Mercedes-Benz EQS 580 4MATIC. Kate, we've had a look around, we've driven it. Now it's time for our verdict. Did you have fun? And who is it for?
Well, did I have fun? It's a great car to drive. It's surprisingly good to drive given its size. But I still prefer my own one.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a lot of money, this is a great car.
Absolutely.
It's one of the most efficient EVs out there in terms of its coefficient of drag, but it's spoiled by the fact that it has a huge amount of weight, and so it's not necessarily going to give you the longest range per kilowatt hour that you use. There are more efficient cars in that regard on the market in terms of you can go further on kilowatt hour of electricity. But because this battery is huge, 350, 400 miles is easily achievable.
It absolutely is. In fact, draining it was a challenge.
The driving experience of this is far better than a Tesla on roads like this. Just streets ahead, because of that rear wheel steering, because of the fact that it's got this lovely air suspension. It hunkers down above a certain speed to get you better range, to be more aerodynamic. It can raise up if it detects that it's on uneven ground. That's obviously straight from Tesla's playbook, but it does so with an interior that is far more relaxing
I think, and it's far more traditional. If you are someone who has money and is used to the comforts in life, then the Spartan interior of the Tesla, which many people really like, is not necessarily what you're going to be looking for.
And that's a cool thing about this, right? I mean, we're talking about a super high-end luxury premium electric car that goes head-to-head with Lucid Air, head-to-head with a Tesla Model S Plaid. The Tesla Model S Plaid beats this hands down when it comes to straight line performance. But it doesn't necessarily beat it in other areas. The seats in this are far better than any Tesla seat I've sat in. Granted, I haven't sat in the Plaid seats yet. The interior in-car tech feels more refined in a lot of ways, although we have that problem, that 80-90% complete, that last bit needs to be finished.
It definitely does, and I hope that's something that they address with the over-the-air updates, because that last bit can be so irritating. It can be really good a lot of the time, and then you come to rely on it, you ask it to do something and it doesn't do it, and that can be very frustrating.
But Mercedes is not really looking for new customers of this. It's looking for existing customers to go electric. This is a car for Mercedes-Benz customers. This is not going to win anybody away from a Tesla. It's not going to win anybody back from a Lucid. And if I had to choose between a Lucid Air sedan, a Tesla Model S Plaid, and this, I think I'd probably go Lucid Air first, because that just feels like a very well-made car. I'd go with a Tesla second, and I'd choose this third. Because I know that Tesla has the engineering. I know Mercedes-Benz has a reputation in the engineering, but I think some of the niggles about this car would become problematic after a long period of time, like the fact that the rear seat is not comfortable for long distance trips.
I think I have to agree with you, and unfortunately that for me is really down to the front seats. I mean, I just could not get that headrest to somewhere where I could sit in the seat, and driving down here, particularly after driving all day yesterday, I felt like I was getting a crick in my neck and I just couldn't resolve it.
No front trunk.
Nope.
Which is ridiculous. Rear load bay is okay, but that it just doesn't feel like an entire package. And the big issue, and if I was in Europe, if I lived in Europe and I had the money to buy this car, the top speed would be an issue. I've driven a Tesla Model S on the Autobahn flat out, and it was a really lovely experience. This car could not match the Tesla Model S on an Autobahn because it's electronically limited to a ridiculously slow speed.
It does make it really confusing that a car from a European automaker wouldn't handle an Autobahn.
Not just a car from a European automaker, but the oldest car company in the world, the father of the automobile.
A German
car maker whose internal combustion S-Classes can go up and down on the Autobahn all day. This needs to meet that. And I think Benz is scared about what would happen to the range at high speeds. So they've cut that out. But I think in Europe that would cut a lot of people out from the marketplace. I know plenty of people who live in Germany, who live in mainland Europe, who would buy this car for the comfort. The ride is sublime. It is good opulence. It's not too much. But also they would want to be able to do 100 miles in an hour or 45 minutes on the Autobahn if they have unrestricted segments near them, and this car would just feel like it wouldn't be offering them what they would expect. Which brings me to who I think this car is actually for. The first one, I think, is a limo service, a high-end airport limo transfer service. It picks you up at your fancy pad in London, it takes you to Heathrow Airport, it's a 20-minute drive. You're probably sitting in the back, but you're excited about going on holiday or whatever, and you don't mind that your knees are a bit high up and it's a bit cramped in the back. The second is for rich people.
What kind of rich people?
Rich people, but not really rich people.
Yeah.
A really rich person wouldn't buy this car.
No, they don't need to.
No, they'd own a Lucid Air for long distance trips, and they'd have a Niro EV or something similar as their runabout car.
The cheap runabout. Yes, I recall one of my friends who had more money had a Clio as their daily driver.
Yeah, I had a friend who grew up in a house with a ballroom, who drove a beaten-up Ford Fiesta.
Yeah, if you've got old money, you don't need to show it.
And that is where I'm left with this car. Not for me, but hey, it's a cracking car.
It absolutely is.
Thanks to Mercedes-Benz for letting us borrow this car, and thank you for watching at home.
That's it for today. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to leave your thoughts below or in our free to join Discord chat room. There's a link in the video description. And if you want to tell us how awesome we are without leaving YouTube, why not try a super thanks? It's easy to pass on the love and it all goes to helping the channel grow. Don't forget we produce videos every single day on this network for you to enjoy, ranging from deep dives to tutorials, features and unboxings and reviews. And if you want the most comprehensive roundup of all the news in the EV world on a weekly basis, check out our 10 news show every Saturday. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to this channel and our other channel, Transport Evolved Take 2, and give the bell a gentle ding to make sure you're told when our next video goes live.
Thanks on behalf of the entire TE crew go to the folks on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month supporters. Special thanks to our $50 a month patrons. That's Chris Maxwell, Bennett Elder, Brian Newton, Dave Kitchen, Michael Goad, Ricky Leon, Andrew Martin, Guido Drahota, Brophy Wolf, Tazlet and the Gong, Gordon C, Stephen O'Donoghue, Carl Hodgson, Anthony Coates, Regine Fellows, Rory Litzman, Anonymous Freak, Jim Burness, Chris Centaur and Denny Hyde. And our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month supporters. Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, Joe Bresney, JP Fagerback, Will Grayland, Matthew Drobnak, John Lyons, Christopher Lee Jones, Andrew Glenn, Paul Conway, Laura Reynolds, Ellery Hensley and Ian. If you'd like to be part of that super amazing list of supporters, you can join Patreon at the link below. You can hit the join button to support us on YouTube, or you can show us your support through Ko-fi, buying something from our cool swag store, and of course, there are links below. And look, if you're unable to support us financially, just know that watching this video, liking it, sharing it, and commenting really helps with our analytics. Thanks for joining us, and as always, keep evolving.